So you're very welcome to airing it if you have only joined us there now. So part of the program this week, we will be looking at the news headlines first of all, and then I'll give my thoughts and reflections on some of the main headlines and some of the sporting highlights that have come through during the week that are notably important to mention. I'm not going to divert anyone's attention from COVID, but I suppose the scarce claims by many public and health officials is quite important at the moment with the Omicron variant, which has started sweeping through Europe. So again, the health message there is to be cautious, keep up to date with the news as it unfolds. So keep washing them hands, wearing the mask, and social distance where possible. So first of all, I'm going to bring you the headlines, as always. So, first of all, the mandatory COVID passports take effect in Northern Ireland from today. The measures will mean people must show proof of vaccination, a negative test, or recent COVID infection to gain access to venues including pubs, restaurants, and cinemas. The new rules officially take effect from Tuesday, the 29th of November, so today. The details of a redress scheme for thousands of homeowners affected by the Micra scandal, which was caused by defective blocks, will go to Cabinet today, and it will allow a total of up to €420,000 to be sent to homeowners and those on the rental market who were affected. This will offer 100% grant for repair and rebuilding works. So apparently it's €145 per square foot, and that'll total up to 420,000 per person claiming. Supermax boss Pat McDonough has confirmed that the group is now recruiting workers from overseas due to a shortage of Irish applicants. Mr. McDonough said that over the past 2 months and up to the end of the year, Supermax will have recruited over 100 EU workers who do not require work permits from Eastern Europe, Italy, Portugal and Spain. Mr. McDonough stated that one of the reasons for the shortage of workers here is the government's pandemic unemployment payment. He described that as people who think that and his opinion was that the PP payment has caused people to get a bit lazy. I don't know what people's take on that is, but maybe a bit too harsh, rude, considering the circumstances in the past year. And lastly, the Caribbean island nation of Barbados will tonight sever centuries-old ties to the British monarchy, ditching Queen Elizabeth II as head of state and declaring itself the world's newest republic. That came in yesterday. The royal standard flag that represents the Queen will be lowered in the capital of Bridetown, and the current Governor-General Sandra Mason will be inaugurated as the first president. So that's good news for Botswana. So let's just begin with some of maybe the things that I've been trolling through social media and just what I've been watching the past few days. Some of the main things that struck me was, despite the COVID Omicron variant, I'm not going to go into that at all as much as I want to go into the new variants, mutations, etc., etc. I think everyone is pretty sick of that, so I'm not going to go into it at all. What I will mention will be the Claire Byrne live show. Something really struck me last night, and it's a bit controversial, considering legislation in regards to cannabis has been debated many times, but we're not going to discuss that particular topic. Maybe that'll be some other time that will be discussed once we have guests allowed into the studio. At the moment, we can't have guests due to the restrictions. and the renovations that are taking place. So it's only my voice, unfortunately, for the time being, but hopefully you get used to it and adapt to it shortly. But some of the things that just came up on the Claire Byrne show were quite notable. I must mention, first of all, the young man from Kildare. I think it was from Rathcoffey or something. He was from. His story was quite remarkable and very brave, in my opinion. It takes a lot of bravery and confidence to go onto Claire Byrne for a start, but to be interviewed on a life and near-death experience was something else. So well done to Conor Harris for coming out on the Claire Byrne show for his previous addiction problem that he was suffering from. His addiction was cocaine. Um, Cocaine is an epidemic. It has swept through every county in Ireland by this stage, and many people consider it a taboo topic to talk about. I think the taboo topic is quite scary, and I think when something comes up as a taboo topic, um, people shouldn't shy away from talking about things that shouldn't otherwise be explained, or for more information to inform people about certain topics or things. I remember um, things like uh, reproductive rights and whether it was marriage equality or something like that. They were all taboo topics at one stage. Eventually got around to talking about things like that and allowing people the expressive right to vote and whatever else on these topics. So I am going to discuss um, my thoughts on the Claire Byrne live show regarding cocaine use and the dangers of that. Um, so one of the things that struck me on the show was the sense of instability and fear around drug use in Ireland. I think a lot of people think it's just it's only a bit of cocaine. We're going to have it once a week, whatever, and that can gradually result in a near death, just like Connor experienced himself. And people need to assess what they're doing and the consequences of their actions a little bit more. We don't all have great moral compasses, but I do think a lot more consideration needs to be taken with regards to drug use, and because we don't know what we're putting into our bodies and the effects that could be caused from taking drugs. And you know what about the family who are left behind? That's another thing that might frighten people listening, but these are real things that you need to consider. And Connor didn't consider these things at the time. It took something as serious of nearly passing out and having a heart attack, as he described it as, and being with his mother and his best friend, that he came to realize the importance of those who are around him. Um, so we must consider the consequences, both financial. He was in a lot of debt, 20,000 euros. The educational, or the your work, your job that you're trying to keep, that can be affected. Your hobbies. He eventually left his GAA uh, training sessions and his matches as a result of his addiction. So, what's kind of causing this? I suppose it's been brought in to our cities and it's been distributed along county lines where I suppose enforcement and between different Gardaí divisions are not as strong. That's caused a lot of transport across county borders, bringing in drugs. That's quite scary for those living along the borders. It could be feuds, etc. And one of the main causes for the rise in drug use was around the Celtic Tiger time, when a lot of people had more financial um, expenditure, and so this has led to like the rise in people's income, and PEP has been one of the main areas where people had an excessive amount of income in their accounts, that they were able to expenditure power was higher, especially like young people who 350 into their account, they wouldn't make that in a week working. So when they're getting that a week sitting at home, you kind of wonder what people actually do with that money. And a lot of people took, out of boredom, took drugs to kind of give them an outlet and something to do, while all their hobbies were shut down. Like they couldn't go to their dance lessons or their indoor activities, for example, basketball, etc., etc. They're all closed. Indoor sporting was closed most of the time. Outdoor sporting was limited. Um, Especially in rural areas where, you know, GAA is the main dominant sport in the countryside. You won't get the facilities such as leisure centres, etc., in rural areas. So I think that caused a considerable rise in the use of cocaine in the GAA communities, which was highlighted in a recent newspaper article covered by the Irish Independent, that it's an epidemic. It's across every single GAA club, and that was highlighted by some GAA members. So it's worth considering, considering the consequences. And so I'm just looking at some of the headlines. So the Western Reporter did report on the issue, saying that a lot of drugs came in from Galway into South Mayo. Um, so that's not surprising. And I think when people have a lot more income to use up, I think that's when they take to things that aren't exactly productive in their lives. And for me personally, I don't think drug use is how to deal with your spare time. I think people need to um, take up a sport or a hobby that's doesn't that kind of helps them to learn or develop, rather than the health consequences of drugs is not something I would appeal people to use. So obviously, if people need help or support, if you know somebody that is going down that line of excessive use of drug use, I would encourage people to step up and be the friend or the relative who cares for their loved one or their best friend, and to help them and to guide them, to support. There's great counsellors out there who can provide some mental health counselling if that's what they need. Because, in other words, a lot of people are taking drugs in order to cope with the underlying problems they may have, or, you know, to be around people that they think are very cool or popular, and that's no way to, come out as being you. I think you can express yourself in other ways, and I don't think drugs. I think they bring out a faded personality in people. I don't think they bring out the true personality in someone. So, yeah, that's kind of my reflection and opinion on that topic. So, thanks for listening to that. Now, some of the things that came up also in the previous week or two was the student protests, namely No Keys, No Degrees protests that was held in Dublin. So it's kind of the exacerbation of the housing crisis that has impacted upon students. It's been covered by most newspapers and radio headlines across this month, but really the problem hasn't gone away. I don't think it'll ever go away this year, indeed, until COVID still lingers around. Um, the problem is still going to be here. I know a lot of people who are landlords, and they weren't taking people into their homes, particularly the elderly population that I've spoke to. They aren't taking anybody into their homes due to the risk, especially these new variants. They're not going to take people in and risk themselves when they haven't got their booster jobs, etc. So, leaving COVID aside, it is still going to be a problem, and I think there was calls there by the government opposition to bring in free purpose-built accommodation that is not free, but at a reduced cost. And that's fair. That's a fair statement to make. I think it was from a government minister actually, and he did mention that the government are in line to build more purpose-built accommodation for the student population that is affordable. Yes, it was Simon Harris. Actually, he is the Minister for Higher Education, and he did explain to listeners on News Talk with Michael McGrath, who's the Fianna Fáil Minister for State. Both of them both agreed that the government are going to build student-built accommodation that is a lot more affordable than what we currently have in order to support students in the future. So that is a positive news story. It's nice to hear something positive. Despite the protests, I do have some confidence that the government will introduce measures to deal with the crisis that students are currently facing. I remember at the start of the year, a young lady approached the shop that I work in. I'm not going to name the person or the shop that I'm in to give away anything, but she approached the shop. She was from County Dublin, North County Dublin, or no, sorry, County Meath, who she was. She was from Bettystown, and she approached the shop asking, did we know of any accommodation? Now, considering all the shops in Maynooth and the shop that I'm in is very small and kind of out of the way, she must have went to every single shop and asked the same question. Otherwise, she wouldn't have, um, you know, because she didn't know anybody in the shop themselves. So that was the sheer desperation by some people, and the actual crisis that Maynooth faced and everywhere else. So, and I heard people had to stay in Glen Royal Hotel. Now that is quite, it's unbelievable the amount of the things that young people have to go through. And starting off university and college across the country, you're excited, you're wanting to get away. It's a new place, new friends, and all the social experiences that come with. She has just been like left aside, forgotten, and her experience of university won't be the same as those who've got accommodation in Maynooth, and she is at a loss socially and financially, and it's very unfair, I think, for people not to get the same experience. But yeah, so moving on, I'm going to move on to the climate crisis. Looking at some of the figures for methane. So methane is one of the emissions that is caused by agricultural farming, and it's something that is raised concerns among the rural communities, and they fear this climate green is a threat to their production of cattle farming and whichever farming they're into. They held protests, brought tractors into Dublin, caused a lot of chaos, but I understand their concerns. I do think I think it was driven by fear in most cases, which led to that protest that was held in Dublin by the farmers. I think we are moving into this climate green, more digital green economy, and I think we need to adapt to the changes there. I do trust when the Minister of Agriculture came out on News Talk last week regarding the crisis that farmers face, and he did support the farmers. I do believe that he did support them, and he does feel that farmers are going to get helped, and the amount of cattle is not going to be reduced. So I think a lot of fear is driven into things, and I don't think people, there's no respect for people who do that, in my opinion. Um, so lastly, I do want to draw up on the birth rate, surprisingly. 1.5 is the ratio for the Irish birth rate. This is down from 2.5 in 2007, which in 2007 we had the highest birth rate in the European Union. The recession, which hit us in 2008, led to a decrease, and during the 2020 outbreak of the pandemic, there was an 8.8% drop in births. So a total of 25% fall in birth rates over the past decade. That is quite shocking. That's a really strange figure, to drop from being the highest in the European Union to dropping so low. It's actually lower than 1 at 0.1. So it's actually it's lower. It's going to be lower than 0.8 in Hong Kong at the moment. So it doesn't surprise me. Where they had the one-child policy over in China, so that effect could be a reason for that. But for Ireland, it's quite concerning. We're a small island nation, and we can't rely on migrants all the time. I think a strong economy, a strong culture, is it's the people who make it, and the youth are the future of the country, not the economically active who migrate over to Ireland just for work and send all that money back home. The future of Ireland is youth, and I fully support initiatives to increase the birth rate during the financial pressure zones that we have at the moment from COVID and the recession and things that can be a cause of that. But I hope that's resolved with a stronger economy, stable government, and initiatives to help support women and families. And lastly, I want to highlight the sports. So the two big sports stories this week that I found was that James McCartan will lead the Down senior men. He used to manage Down back in 2010 when they were going for an All-Ireland title. So they were great heydays, but he's now going to be under Conor Laverty. Him and Conor Laverty are going to be coaching. And also Cork Camogie team have got a new coach, Davy Fitzgerald. Davy Fitzgerald will take over coaching the Cork Camogie team. So all suspicions of who will be taking over them two teams were highly and Shefflin will be taking over the Galway team. So all great stories from the sports end, and thank you very much for joining me on Airing It on Mars FM. Please do keep in touch on our social media channels, and there'll be new announcements of shows, etc. So thank you very much for joining me on Airing It, folks. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.